Hello, and welcome to I'm a Fan of That, a podcast about all things fandom told through objects, stories, and studies, with a bit of silliness along the way. Your hosts on this journey are pop culture writer, journalist, and cosplay expert, Holly Swinyard, and myself, Vivian and Asimos, a public anthropologist and pop culture academic with a PhD in religion and popular culture. Join us as we wander down the incredible and intriguing path into fan culture, its history, the people who make it up, and the way that we look at this ever-growing part of our society. Fair warning, we may talk about some adult themes, use some adult language, and possibly get a little bit nerdy about the whole thing. You have been warned.
You hear the sound of a klaxon, and the whole world fills with fog. Welcome to I'm a Fan of That in Silent Hill! No, I won't do that. But there you go. Yeah, we're going to do Silent Hill today. I don't think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
I just wanted to do it like that. I love Silent Hill. That's it. That's the introduction. You're not getting anything else. I don't know what Silent Hill would look like for us. Probably be fine. I don't think either of us have murdered anybody or, you know.
Yeah, sure. No,
yeah, that's fine. No.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. No deep, dark secrets here. But yeah. Anyway, hello. Welcome to I'm a Fan of That, where we do podcasting, apparently, and also do terrible introductions that nobody gets.
Somebody will get it, and that'll be
yeah,
fun. That person's having a grand old time.
That person is Rob, who's on our Patreon, and who cosplays from Silent Hill too. So hi, Rob.
That was just for you, Rob.
Yeah, just for you, specifically for you, and also the fact that you love Welcome to Night Vale. So you are exactly the target audience for that. You're a big gamer in general, but you're not like me. You don't like the spooky games in the same way.
Okay. So the reason why I don't play a lot of spooky games is that a large majority of them are first person. And I know, I don't think Silent Hill is, but the newer one was, like, 7 was?
No, that's Resident Evil.
Oh, that's Resident Evil. Jesus Christ. But I think Silent Hill, like, the early ones weren't. Like
No, they weren't.
But some of the newer ones, for example, it's kind of become a very classic part of the genre is to have it be first person. Mm-hmm. And I get motion sick.
Oh, yeah, that's valid.
So I can't really do that. And I think I really struggled with, like, the fixed camera, which I know is another Resident Evil thing, but the fixed camera things, which was another classic.
Yeah. So Silent Hill also has fixed camera. The original ones do. Because that's kind of how video games were being made at the time more than anything else. Yes, they are definitely... I'm trying to think if the new Silent Hill games... There hasn't been a new Silent Hill game in a long time.
I guess PT kind of was.
Yes.
Which was first person.
Yeah, which was first person. I'm sure we do count it, but... Yes, let's not get too deep into mechanics yet. We will.
But that is why I don't. It's not like that. I don't like them or I wouldn't enjoy them. It's just it's purely a nausea related issue.
I get that. That's fair enough. It's why I really struggle with VR games. But
I will watch. Well, I say watch. I will have it on while I am doing, because again, I can't watch it because I will get motion sick. But I tend to have them on and kind of by osmosis people playing spooky games because I did play a first person spooky game semi recently because I had to for my PhD, and which was Slender: The Arrival.
Oh.
And so I played that one, and I had to keep taking breaks. because of it. And then I had a load of bread, and just because that helps me not feel nauseous, and just ate bread and took breaks.
And not to kind of put it out there, but indie horror games in first person, where they're particularly things like the Slender Man games, where they're doing that kind of shaky cam thing. I don't know if that one is particularly, but a lot of them are doing that sort of Blair Witch kind of vibe. That's worse. That's a lot worse. Yeah. Which it is obviously a different caliber, but that's been the only spooky game I have played as of late. But I do enjoy the horror genre. Yes, I love horror games. I am bad at playing horror games to a great. Like, I will play them, and I will also do them in 20-minute increments, but mostly because I'll just need to like calm down a little bit. And then be like, okay, my heart rate's gone back to normal. Back in we go. Anybody who knows me is that I'm a big Resident Evil fan. I have been a big, massive Resident Evil fan since I was a teenager. And I played Resident Evil 4, one of the greatest games of all time. I have, I would say, in the last 5, 6 or so years, come round to the Silent Hill games, which lots of my friends were into when I was a teen, but I don't know why. They just, at the time, I didn't click with them. Maybe it was because I was more into the sort of action-adventure games as a teen.
Yeah, they're more spooky than
They're definitely more
zombie.
cerebral, yeah. I mean, Resident Evil is shoot people and run around.
Yeah.
Until even the more recent ones where you do have a much more horror element to them, they are shoot people and run around.
Yeah.
We're not talking about Resident Evil. I could talk about Resident Evil for ages. But like with Silent Hill, it's more about, and particularly Silent Hill 2, which is the one, our object, Silent Hill 2, and Silent Hill 4, particularly, are much more in that cerebral, what is all of this, what's going on kind of place. I don't know if Silent Hill 1 is. Silent Hill 1 kind of explains itself a bit. Like, okay, so for people who don't know, there are 4 main Silent Hill games, and they were all made late 90s into the noughties. And there are kind of some spin-offs and bits like that. And as we said, PT, which was a trailer demo for a new teaser for a new Silent Hill game.
Trailer, one would say.
Exactly. It never got made.
No.
I think Del Toro was connected to it in some way.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah. And we have very recently had the remake of Silent Hill 2, and they have just announced 2 new Silent Hill games. Silent Hill F, which will be the first Silent Hill game set in Japan, and then a new Silent Hill game set properly in Silent Hill. Somebody will probably correct me and say, actually, no, they're not doing that. It's a rumour or whatever. But from my reading of the pop culture websites, this is what my understanding is. But yeah, Silent Hill 2 is probably one of the greatest video games of all time. And I'm not even meaning that personally. It genuinely is. It really thought about what a video game could be and broke a lot of barriers, and actually references a huge amount of not just horror history, but like psychological thriller, and a huge amount of very artsy kind of games with films within it and all that kind of stuff. So it's a special thing, but also it never really explains itself. It doesn't tell you why Silent Hill exists. It doesn't tell you what's happening. It doesn't really explain to you whether the ending is real or not, and it never quite, unless you sit down and think about it, really lets you know whether the narrator is 100% reliable or not. James, whether he's telling the truth or whether all of this is his excuse for what he's done. Because what he's done, spoilers, is horrific. Like, absolutely horrific. The premise of the Silent Hill franchise in general, and again, I'm not sure if Silent Hill 1 counts. There are lots of Silent Hill games, but Silent Hill 1, like I said, it kind of explains Silent Hill. It goes, hey, this is a town with a cult in it, and we're trying to bring about the end of the world with a demon god. Cool. That's a pretty standard, now, particularly horror game storyline, right? This is a town with a cult in it. And they're gonna try and destroy the world. That's pretty horror movie, horror game fodder. But then you have the second game, where a random person arrives in this town and is seemingly just being walked through hell and punished and shown visions and nightmares and all this sort of stuff in order to come to terms with something that's happened to them, which is also what then happens in a slightly different way in Silent Hill 4. And I think that's super interesting because it moved away from what Resident Evil was, the other big horror franchise at the time. They were coming out roughly around the same time. They're quite comparable to each other in gameplay style. But Resident Evil always kind of said, zombie apocalypse, there's been an outbreak. Murder, kill all the zombies and get out. You know, that's pretty much the storyline of every Resident Evil game. I love them, but it is. And Silent Hill doesn't do that. Silent Hill, I think, particularly Silent Hill 2, really paved the way for what more psychological horror could be in video games, because I think since then we have seen a lot more games of that like happen. Things like Amnesia. I'm trying to think off the top of my head because now of course I've forgotten all the horror games that are like this.
That artist one? What was that one called?
Oh!
Art of Fear? Fear of Art?
Yeah. And then there's like The Evil Within, that is kind of in that ilk as well. The Evil Within's amazing, by the way, if people haven't played it. But yeah, there's lots of games kind of more like that. And I think that is because Silent Hill is scary because it's about the psychology of the person, rather than, here's a monster, you should kill it. I mean, there are lots of monsters in Silent Hill, but they're all to do with the people who are there, and they're caused by the people who are there in some capacity. But yeah, and I find that super interesting that they went from the original story, which they do come back to in Silent Hill 3, of this is a town with a cult in it, to make this completely separate game that doesn't really... I mean, the idea is that because this town had a cult in it, that's why it becomes spooky and that's why it triggers all of these things. But it never really explains that in Silent Hill 2. Like, you could go into it completely clean, not knowing any of that lore, and it still works. And you might get little tidbits about it maybe, but you don't get loads. Like, they don't lean into what happens in Silent Hill 1 to explain Silent Hill 2 at all, which I think is quite an interesting thing and relatively unusual, particularly at the time. But like, have you played them at all?
No. Again, okay. I've now it's been a very, very long time, but I think I've seen somebody play probably 2. If I were to hazard a guess, because that's the one that, like you say, like a lot of people talk about and play and discuss and stuff like that. But I can't remember much about it. I mean, I remember the main things, but like I don't remember specifics and stuff because again, I was watching people play it rather than playing it myself because again, it just wasn't in my cards.
That's fair enough. So Silent Hill 2 is third person, so I think you could play the remake because it doesn't have fixed camera.
Yeah, maybe. Because I think one of the problems is the fixed cameras that like Resident Evil and some of the really early games had had similar issues with me. But it's also so on top of having motion sickness all the time, I have really, really terrible depth perception. And this is something that also makes it really difficult for me to drive because I used to get a lot of driving anxiety because it would look like 2 cars were about to hit and I would brace myself, but they were like in different lanes.
Oh.
So, which is
okay, so maybe, I can see why it might be a problem.
Yeah, so I struggle a lot with video games in general a lot of the times because of that. So I have found certain art styles are more easy to see the distance and the depth because especially like 2D ones, you don't have to worry about that tricky third dimension. Yeah.
I'm starting to think why maybe these games aren't in your top 10.
Yeah, which is, it sucks because I do like them and I think it would be cool to play, but it is just unfortunately my body does not.
Given, like you said, that you did your PhD with Slenderman and stuff like that, I really think the lore of Silent Hill, particularly Silent Hill 2, is right up your street because it kind of plays into all of those things that Slenderman does in the same kind of way of like the reality of it and what do these characters mean and all that kind of thing and do they mean actually anything, particularly character of Pyramid Head, which is sort of the archetype of Silent Hill. And I think a lot of people, Pyramid Head kind of keeps being brought back in the other games, so not in the main 4 but in the others you kind of keep because he's so prominent, but actually he is really only a fixture in Silent Hill 2 and he is representative of stuff in that game. But I would have thought Pyramid Head as a figure would have kind of featured into your research in some way, but
well, he might be on a list for a book that I have been pitching. But
I find him,
but I mean I think that horror in general, obviously regardless of the medium, shares a lot of really similar aspects, and it's one of the arguments that I make with the Slender Man is that even though it's a bunch of people online talking shit, it still does follow a lot of the same formatting elements, and so yeah, I'm not surprised that a video game fits it. I think because I did a short study of a Resident Evil game, and I don't know why I ended up picking Resident Evil rather than Silent Hill, but I remember I was debating between the two at the time. But I did an article which you can read, and if you can't get it for free through some other resource, let me know, because it's a journal article, so I make no money off of it, so I will just give it to you for free. But I wrote a journal article about how to study video games as mythology, and I used a Resident Evil game as my like case study.
Oh, I want to read that.
So, yeah. So anyway, I mean, I'm not going to get into the details of what I was talking about because that's not important. But basically, because it wasn't really necessarily about the lore of the game, but it was so much as the way that a video game is constructed of multi-layered narratives, and then how you go about actually studying that.
That's really interesting. Because the other game franchise I think fits really nicely into this same kind of narrative of the reality, how much of it is to do with the person, how much is it to do with the place, all that kind of stuff, is Fatal Frame, which again you may not have played. Have you? Yeah.
I haven't played it, but know it.
Yeah. So Fatal Frame, for, again, people who don't know, is a Japanese franchise. I mean, they're all Japanese franchises, but like specifically Fatal Frame, I don't think all of them have been translated into English.
I don't think
properly.
so.
If you are interested in watching them translated, Gab Smulders on YouTube has translated all of them because she is a Japanese translator as well as a gamer. And that's really interesting just to see someone translate it. They are an incredibly interesting franchise as well that bases itself a lot in, obviously, Japanese mythology rather than Silent Hill is much more based into Freudian and various Western psychologists' analysis of the brain.
Or you could call it Freudian mythology, because
that's
I probably would use similar language.
Yeah, it's very definitely Freudian, you know.
Because that's a whole thing.
Yeah, whatever you decide to base your ideas of Freud on. The people listening didn't see my face then, which was one of disdain. Fatal Frame is more based in Japanese mythology, specifically around ghosts and temple shrines and things like that. And shrine maidens. Every single Fatal Frame game revolves around a specific type of shrine maiden and a specific type of ceremony, and they're very interesting games because of that. And again, I think you'd probably find a lot in them where you could be like, oh, yes, and be very academic about it. But they also come down to like the individuals involved because of that nature of the shrine maiden character being at the core, particularly of the first one and a few of the subsequent ones, that character being very much the centre point of them. And so it has to be somebody who fits that archetype and makes sense within the narrative of the mythology, has to be at the core of it. And Silent Hill also does that, except the mythology revolves around that person, that they're almost creating it. So every time somebody enters Silent Hill who has done a bad in some capacity, that does seem to be a part of it, or at least has a dark secret in their past, there's things that they aren't acknowledging, all this sort of stuff. Silent Hill forms around them to reflect that. I mean, Silent Hill it's not a real town, but it is a place. It's not just it magically appears out of nowhere in the games. It's that it's a place and then it becomes this other world as you venture through it, and very almost dreamlike. One of the things that people talk about with the game is how the dialogue always, in every single one, the dialogue always feels really uncanny and like very, almost kind of like people aren't talking properly. And that is to create this sort of dreamlike state of like in dreams people don't necessarily converse in a way that you're expecting, or things don't quite work, like a door will open into a wall, or, you know, all this kind of stuff. That Silent Hill feels like that, and Fatal Frame also feels like that, that everything's very uncanny and not quite right because you're shifting between these planes of existence. One of the things I absolutely love about Silent Hill 2, and I really like how they put this into the remake, was how almost everybody kind of talks like this. And even though they're talking about really awful things, it's just really relaxing. Apart from James, who is a bit more, like, as the protagonist, he's a bit more like, what the hell is going on? But even he is not, like, super aggressive or, like, animated or anything. He's still, like, quite chill in himself, as if running into Pyramid Head is totally normal. You know, there's a point where he's like hiding in a cupboard from Pyramid Head, and like Pyramid Head's like the other side of the door, it's like got slats so you can see through. And while he's scared, he does not seem particularly like, this is going to be the end of my life, you know. And that shifts in different encounters and all that kind of stuff, but it's quite interesting, that dreamlike quality of it, just unrealness is the only way I can describe it, that people aren't afraid of it in the same way until they are, and then it's like a nightmare and it's terrifying, but otherwise it's not, because it's not real. And that's a super interesting thing to, like, as a viewer, as a player, because you're so used to particularly in video games, particularly at the time, video games were very kind of arms all over the place, dramatic, I'm using my hands. That was very kind of common to have that. Or you had the complete opposite of like Pokemon and stuff, where it was just like standing there with a piece of dialogue across the bottom of the screen. Because Silent Hill 2 came out in 2001, so we're not talking like the best graphics of all time here, guys. But they were pretty good. And I think that is part of it. And like, I love Fatal Frame as well. I absolutely adore the Fatal Frame games. I played the first one myself, but I haven't played the rest. Like I said, I've watched those be played because they're not super easy to get in English anymore, like at all. And I think mostly you can get them on like Xbox. And I think now they've done a re-release for the Switch, but they've definitely done the first one on Switch. But I can't remember if they've done all of them. But yeah, they're not necessarily in English and they're not necessarily fully translated. So they're not easy to play. But the lore in them, again, is just so fascinating. And that, like, dreamlike unrealness of the ghost world and, like, you become very trapped in these places, because that's the other thing with Silent Hill and Fatal Frame, is that you become trapped in the location. You can't leave. And so that, again, that dreamlike, nightmarish quality of, if I try to go, I will be pulled straight back in again, is very much there. But yeah, I love that about them. I think they're really fascinating games, and I could go into the lore forever, but I don't want to be the only person talking.
I find the lore aspect of these games kind of interesting, but from a very different perspective, from the kind of anthropologist stepping on the outside, because basically you get people like you that are like, oh my god, let me grab every scrap of paper and then I will explain to you the lore, and I'm going to piece things together, and I've got a cork board in my room with the printouts of these shots, and I'm going to like connect
Don't call me
them.
out like this. Don't do that. Why? No. Look, I know that I watched 5 videos, like video essays that were all more than an hour long in order to do this episode, but you know.
So like there are those people. You're not alone, Holly. Yeah. There are many. The video essays like
already exist.
However, there's like a spectrum, because there's also people who don't give any amount of a shit.
Yeah.
And then you've got everything kind of in between. And this was one of the things that I found when I was doing the research, was that I tried to grab kind of a variety of the different approaches, because those are incredibly different ways to engage with it. Is that you get the people who are like, what's going on? If you ask them, well, what's going on? Oh, I don't know. I'm just doing this thing. Why? I don't know. Because the game is having me go here. That's what's happening. Like, they don't... And they don't see it, and there is nothing wrong. I don't want to say like they don't see anything wrong with that, because there is nothing wrong with that. You're playing the game how you want to play the game. That's fine. But I find it really fascinating that when you do talk about horror, often it is the lore that people focus on. But for video games, that's not always necessarily the case. So like if we were to talk about a Guillermo del Toro movie, it would be hard to not talk about the plot. It would be hard not to talk about the details of what's going on and the intricacy of the narrative and how that builds this tension and da-da-da. But it'd be like if someone watched Guillermo del Toro and then you're like, what's this movie about? And they're like,
I'm sure there are people out there who have said that.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I guess especially with like Pan's Labyrinth, they'd be like, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Pan's Labyrinth particularly is interesting because I think Pan's Labyrinth is one of those movies that has... Oh my god, this is going to show that I did an arts degree, innit? It has a plot, but it also has a story, and those are not the same thing. It has a narrative plot that you follow along, and that it's like, this is the thing, and then the characters are doing this, and all this sort of stuff. But the story is about something else. The story is about the horrific nature of war, and it's not necessarily that that's an allegory, but it's that you can watch from either side. You can watch just following the plot, or you can follow the story of a child's experience of war, and those are kind of slightly different things. It's very pretentious, and I realise that it's arty bullshit, but Silent Hill 2 also does that.
Well, but because I think we were kind of talking about how a lot of the horror stuff is very similar in regards to different medium, and I think that's the case with video games. And one of the benefits of video games is that, and I guess we will get into my paper, but there are, as you said, there's multiple narratives kind of happening. And this is the same for all video games. So regardless of what you're playing, there's always at least, I have it as 2 separate ones, but they intermingle in all sorts of different ways.
Oh, yeah, no, they're not necessarily completely separate. Like I said, that you have plot and story. That doesn't mean they're 2 separate entities. So that's
I'm just trying to stress that in case someone's like, well, actually... So you have what I call implicit myth, which is like the more experiential stuff. So it's the aesthetics, it's how you feel, but it's also your experience of playing the game. And then you have the explicit, which is the actual scripted you know, the scrap notes that you find that explains the lore kind of thing. But those intersect, obviously, quite a lot. And so you end up with a large kind of weird mishmash of different ways of engaging. But what is interesting about horror is that I think that because horror as a genre is defined by how it makes you feel, right? Like, there's not very many other... I mean, maybe comedy is the only other genre.
But romance, maybe?
Yeah,
romance,
maybe.
You're following the romance and it making you feel a certain way.
But I would say that you could read a romance plot and not find it, like, not be that enticed with it, but still know and recognize it as romance.
Maybe I don't mean romance, maybe I mean erotica.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I guess erotica would be a bit different, because if you didn't feel it that way, it would read as a romance, which is different.
But also, I think erotica and horror... They skirt a fine line with each other.
They have fun. They like to hang out.
They're in a... What do you mean Pyramid Head, like, definitely sexually assaulting the weird leg monsters is... What? No! It's horrible. It's horrible. I don't like that bit at all. It's very uncomfortable. For obvious reasons, and it's meant to be. But for other people... It might not be. I know there's definitely people out there. Anyway, yes, horror is meant to make you feel stuff in the same way that...
I think because of that, it means that because no matter which way you are approaching the narrative, whichever side of this story, the type of myth that you are more drawn to, which isn't the right way to put it, but you know what I mean. I think that no matter what, you can still get out of it what the genre is intending for you to get out of it. Even if you don't necessarily get into, you know, Freud or Japanese mythology, you are still getting the horror of it and understanding that to a certain degree. Yeah. Where if you played through Zelda and, I don't know, didn't feel particularly adventurous, I don't know, you could still, like, you'll still playing... You might, like, miss a lot of it, or you're not understanding certain things, or you don't get why people like it. While I think you can get why people like a particular horror game, even if you don't engage with it the exact way that other people engage with it.
And I think particularly because I, despite the fact that I do enjoy horror games, don't like a jump scare, that to me is like, please don't. I just want for me, the horror atmosphere is what I love. I don't want to suddenly have a moment, because that's unpleasant. But obviously a lot of horror games do rely on jump scares as the kind of... It's cheap, and I think if you rely on it too much, you need to rethink your atmosphere in the game, because you should feel scared by the atmosphere in the place without having anything like that. I mean, no harm in having one or two, but I think if it's lots, then...
There was a jump scare in the latest Nancy Drew game. I don't know if... I
don't mind a jump scare. Like, it's fine. You can have them in anything.
I don't know
I just think if you're doing a horror game and it's all jump scares, then what are you doing?
I don't know how many Nancy Drew girlies we got listening, but there was a bit where you're, like, doing like, downloading a file on a computer, and then, like, a virus thing that has, like, a specific shape, like, suddenly pops up on the screen. Wow. Yeah. And the first time I saw it, I didn't do a jump scare, but we were just recently rewatching, and I did jump. But we were watching a streamer play it, and he jumped out of his fucking skin. It was so funny. Because you're not expecting it. Nancy Drew's not a horror game, for anyone who has no idea who Nancy Drew is, but...
It's like a detective game, because they're detective books, aren't they?
Yeah, they're like, they're very kid detective books, and so the games are a little point and click kind of solve a crime.
I think it's interesting, because I think there's a lot of horror games out there that have tried to emulate what these ones we've talked about, particularly Silent Hill, have done. Quite recently, there's been a game called Still Wakes the Deep, which is an eldritch horror game, which I really enjoyed. I really, really enjoyed. It's essentially a horror walking simulator. You don't really do very much. You kind of move around, and you can interact with things like opening valves and stuff like that, but it's pretty similar to walking simulators like Firewatch, in that, except you're being chased by monsters. And that was really interesting, to play a walking sim horror game, because you have no control at all. Like, you can't change the situation because you don't have any kind of weapons. You're just surviving. And I can see why people didn't like that. I know some of my friends didn't really enjoy it because of that. They felt like they wanted to have more agency in the situation. But I quite enjoyed the fact that you didn't, because it basically made the fact that this was an overwhelming thing that you do not understand or comprehend, because it's eldritch particularly. This isn't just zombies or whatever. It was something beyond space and time, just doing what it does. It wasn't something you could fight. It wasn't something you could destroy particularly, though you do kind of have you can sort of stop it at the end of the game, but again, it's a walking sim, so you're going to do that whatever happens. And I quite enjoyed that as almost like a visual novel kind of element to it, that you were the main character in a horror story, and you would sort of just going through the motions with them and feeling it. And I can see why as a game, people wouldn't necessarily like that, if you like to be active in a game. And I think Silent Hill and Fatal Frame though Fatal Frame has a lot more combat than Silent Hill does. I say combat. You have a camera, you can take pictures of things, your camera is magic. And it's like capturing the soul. It's that myth of capturing the soul in the lens. You have a lot more agency in both Silent Hill and Fatal Frame, in that you can affect things, in that you can kind of fight things. Though in Silent Hill, a lot of the time it's fight until you survive, rather than fight to win. Particularly, again, like Silent Hill 4, I don't think there's really a boss battle as such. Oh, there is right towards the end. But in Silent Hill 4, it's more like, I just need to get through this. Yeah,
I mean, I was going to say, I think, because I think what made PT really fascinating was that you didn't really have a lot of choice.
No, you just have to keep going.
So basically, for people who haven't experienced PT, it's basically you are going through like 3 hallways in a house, just in continuous circle, basically. Yeah. So you would go down into the basement, you open up the door, and then you're back up at the top. You walk through basically back to a hallway, and then you continue to circle around, and you just do that until the game's over.
Yeah. And you can find stuff and things like that. So
things change as you go along, but it changes based off of just you going through rather than you doing things. But for some reason, it still feels like you have some kind of agency in the gameplay, despite the fact that you don't. So I think there's ways to strip the agency but make you have the illusion of choice.
So again, for me personally, with Still Wakes the Deep, I felt like I did have that kind of illusion of choice because of the things of like, you could find stuff, you could explore and all that kind of thing. Again, I know a lot of people... You could
grab the scrap of papers and add it to your little scrapbook of lore.
It was a very me game, okay? Also, I have to say, they did the entire thing in like native Scots dialects, which was incredible. So like all the voice actors are from around Scotland and had very exciting and different dialects, which was really cool because it meant that you could have it in like English and Scots accents, so they did it in both, and then you could have it actually in like actual Scots, which was really interesting to play, because also you really get into like learning how to understand what they're saying, and that was just really, I thought that was super clever as well, just as a like mechanic in the game, to be like, you already feel like things are because Scots, if nobody's ever heard Scots being spoken, kind of, you can understand. If you're a native English speaker, you can understand a lot of it, but it's still its own language, and so there are things you don't understand. And so playing a game which has eldritch horror in it, where all the characters are speaking like that, or some of them speak Scandinavian and things, and you start to like understand bits and pieces as you go, is really, again, quite an interesting element to the game. Please don't come for me, Scots speakers. It's not English. I know it's not English.
Yeah, listening to someone speak Scots to me was always very similar to listening to someone speak Portuguese, because I speak Spanish. And Portuguese is like Spanish, but also really not Spanish.
It's exactly that.
And that's what Scots is. It's like, but absolutely
not. Exactly, yeah. So that adds
one
again...
It's like your brain thinks I should be able to... I should be able to comprehend what's going on, but you can't, because it's not English. But it's like your brain is still trying to do the thing of like, but it doesn't factor it into foreign in quite the way that you would other languages. Yeah. So it's like it keeps trying to understand, even though it's like, but it's not English.
And because some Scots, and particularly other Scottish dialects like Gaelic and Orcadian and what's spoken up in Shetland, which is a form of Norse, have Scandinavian roots to them, when you're listening to the Scandinavian characters, there are a few in there, you get a really... That's even more kind of like, wait, what? You know, because you're kind of halfway there, but you're not. It's really, very strange. And that, I thought, worked brilliantly for this game particularly. And like I said, it added to that uncanniness within the whole thing as an English speaker. I don't know. It must have been very different for Scots speakers. I think it must have been really cool to play that. But we've sidetracked. one of the things I liked and about that particular game, and it's one of the things I like about Silent Hill as well, is it's set over a very tight time period. Like, I think Silent Hill 2 is set over one night, and Still Waits the Deep is set over about 5 hours as the oil rig you're on crumbles into the ocean, never to be seen again. Horrific. And everybody's drowning and dying. It's not necessarily one for people who aren't great with the water or sea, because there are definitely points of unpleasantness. So, it's a horror game, go in with that. It definitely adds to that kind of horror narrative where it's very tight, where you're trapped in one space, but also it's over a very short period of time of like, this is all we have, and that's it kind of thing. So, while I can understand, like I said, I can understand it's not for everybody, in the same way that I definitely understand that Silent Hill is not for everybody. I think these games, they really add to horror as a genre, and people should play them and engage with them in some capacity if they like horror. But it is interesting to see mechanics, because I think that's the other thing, is that when we talk about film, we talk about camera angles and all that kind of stuff. But with games, mechanics play a massive role in how scary things feel. And so if you don't like the mechanics, if you're getting annoyed by the fact that it's essentially a walking simulator, it's not going to be scary because you're annoyed. Whereas like in a film, you're expecting to essentially be a viewer of the walking simulator, because that's not necessarily the right way to describe a film, but you're very much passive in it. Whereas in a video game, you're expecting to have more agency, and if you don't feel like you have that, that might be to its detriment for you. Whereas I think in PT and in Silent Hill 2, there's just, like you said, there's just that enough agency to feel like, oh, I found a piece of wood and I can put a nail through it, which means I can defend myself, kind of thing. Or, oh, I found this thing and that feels like I've changed the hallway.
Yeah, it makes it feel like they've changed it, but really you just walked through the hallway and therefore saw the thing. Mm-hmm. And so then you're like, oh, I saw that thing, so that made it different. When it's like, well, no, It was there. It was just always there.
Yeah.
And therefore it's always going to be different when you walk through again.
Absolutely. And like, I do really like the fact that Silent Hill as well plays into the thing that Resident Evil does of kind of slightly ridiculous puzzles. Like these, they shouldn't make sense. And in Silent Hill, more so than Resident Evil, I think that works because it adds to that surreal, unreal, dreamlike quality of like, you shouldn't be able to go through a giant hole in your wall into another world where you find a certain thing and that puts a handprint on a wall, like, and therefore you can get out. Like, that doesn't make sense. In what world does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. But that adds to how uncanny it is and how weird, because the giant hole in your wall is getting bigger and the handprints are getting worse, and now there's mold on your wall, and it's like, and it's literally like this weird circular nightmare. And for people who don't know, that's Silent Hill 4. Play it, it's great. It's Silent Hill 4, The Room is the one where you essentially, your character wakes up with the inside of their door chained shut and they can't get out, and they have no idea, they have no memory of really getting there or anything. So again, it's that nightmare kind of scenario, repetitive nightmares and things, which is very interesting, and whether it was real or not is, again, never quite confirmed, which I like. I would be really interested if people's favourite Silent Hill games are 1 and 3. I want to talk to those people. Because mine are 2 and 4. And I know lots of people don't necessarily like 4 because it feels very different from the other Silent Hill games. But 1 and 3, like, so 1 and 3 is a continuation of 1. And I would be really interested. Because them, to me, they feel more like Resident Evil. I love Resident Evil. But they don't necessarily do what the other Silent Hill games do. And I don't necessarily need to play Silent Hill and Resident Evil at the same time. But I might, I would be really interested to see if other people resonated with those ones differently. Because people do love Silent Hill 3 particularly. There's a lot of love for that one, but...
Have you ever suffered from night terrors?
Yes.
Okay. I was curious.
Yeah, I get them very infrequently, but when I do, they're incredibly vivid. And, like, kind of the sort of thing where you wake up and be like, was that real? Like, kind of... I could probably, on, like, my fingers count how many times I've had them, but I can tell you exactly every single nightmare I've had, which is not fun.
Yep. Because I don't, like, even though I have aphantasia, as we have talked about multiple times before, and it means that I struggle with memory a lot of the times, because it's like I don't remember it visually, but I might remember other aspects of what was going on. Like, I'll remember what people said, I'll remember what song was playing, but I might not remember like what it looked like. But for some reason, my night terrors I can actually recall, which sucks. It's like the only thing.
Yeah.
But I was curious just because I think a lot of people, if you haven't, then I don't know how much the dreamlike thing sometimes makes sense.
Yeah. And I do wonder if that's why certain people love them and certain people don't.
Yeah.
Because for me, my nightmares, and even like ones I wouldn't necessarily describe as night terrors or nightmares, are maze-like. They're often in places that just can't exist. You know, impossible cities and things like that. It's not even meant to be Lovecraftian, it just sounds it. But like that's what, and so Silent Hill really resonates with that, in that kind of, this shouldn't exist, this shouldn't make sense, I shouldn't be able to walk through here and get to there, and you know, all that kind of stuff. It's very reminiscent of the kind of nightmares I have, and I think probably a lot of people who have bad night terrors, or very vivid night terrors, have. I don't know about you, like if that's what you get in the same way.
I think I've only had one very maze-like one. Which I still remember because it was one of those where I knew it was a night terror, which sometimes you do clock and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And I was trying to run away from something and I knew I just needed to wake, that's all I needed to do to get away was to wake up. And so in the dream, I was hitting my arm on the side because it was literally a maze. And so every time I passed an opening, I would whack my arm on it to try to wake myself up. And when I woke up, my arm was sore. And I don't know if I was just laying on it weird, but like it faded after, you know, a very short amount of time. Yeah. But it was like, I don't know if I was actually physically hitting my arm on something.
Boy,
I have no
weird like
idea.
that. Yeah.
But yeah.
I've definitely had some very, like, this is probably ludicrous, but I've had ones where like the night terror has been like, I've had like, spider webs or something around me. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, it was like I was tangled up in something and I couldn't get out. Like I was completely trapped. And I woke up having ripped like my pajama top open completely, like just completely ripped. Like... Yeah. Which I've never been able to do. Like I can't do that. But like something about my nightmare like physically manifested. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I fully went like sort of Superman on my pajama t-shirt. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I do think maybe that is why those games particularly. I'm like, this is dreamlike. This makes sense. Let's go. I've had dreams like that. You know, maybe that's why I, pick things like the dream sequence, dream cycle even, and that kind of horror does sit with me more. Maybe it is because of the fact that I have that kind of brain. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, because I know some people are like, I don't understand any of that stuff. I like the Scream movies. Valid. I'm not really a slasher person, but I can see why they're maybe more scary.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see why people don't like the was it real, was it not kind of thing, but I think I like when things are fuzzy because I think all of life is fuzzy in the was it real, was it not, but that's my take on reality.
I think that's a good place to stop. Was it real, was it not? Was this entire episode a dream?
Are we not actually real, but we're just floating into your brain in a dreamlike sequence?
Yeah. Like I said, you've woken up in a fog-filled town of Silent Hill.
I don't know why when you talked about like the fog rolling in that I just thought of the albatross from Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I don't know. That was just
Fog's very like
which
that,
is its own level of pretentious artsy to have that in your as the first thing.
I really enjoyed this. I got to talk about Silent Hill. It's great. Like I said, if you haven't played them, you ought to, because they are genuinely... Silent Hill 2 is the remake, probably easier to play than the original now for people who are gamers. But I do, if you encourage people to watch a playthrough of the original as well, because it's an odd experience. Especially the bit with the dog and the UFO. And no, I won't explain that. But the remake is very, very good, so if you are interested in playing it, it's probably one of the most loyal remakes I've seen, where it really understands the... I mean, I still think the Resident Evil remakes are very good as well, but I think it really understood the assignment of holding on to what it was while giving it a bit of a modern shine. Because it doesn't necessarily even describe itself as a remake, it describes itself as a sequel, which I think tells you maybe some idea of what they were thinking about when they made it, and secular natures of these things and all that kind of stuff. So I would definitely recommend playing that if you haven't already. I know you've played it, Rob. You don't need to tell me you've played it. Yeah, I'm very excited to see if the people who maybe it's not their cup of tea normally do engage with it, and please do tell us. And if you're on our Patreon, you get to decide what we talk about sometimes, which is very cool. And we've had a few of our Patreon chosen episodes this series.
Yes. We've also had, we do Q&A options and stuff like that. So if you play a thing or have questions about playing a thing or you enjoy the experience of it, you can go over there.
Yeah. And you can ask us about it. And also you get this whole thing on Friday rather than Monday. So you've got the whole weekend to digest and then come back for a second listen and be like, yes, I liked what you said about that.
Yeah, it means that when your friends listen to it, the plebs they are on the Friday, you can come up with some, like, what seems like off-the-cuff, really thoughtful comment when really you had a whole weekend and they don't even know.
I've really enjoyed this talk, obviously. I got to talk about my favourite things in the world, which is horror gaming. I'm glad we did. I mean, I feel like we've maybe have we talked about horror once per series? Have we talked about it more than
Probably.
that?
At least. Yeah.
At least. And I think it's funny because I think a lot of people out there are like,
Babadook,
Ollie, you're such a scaredy cat. You don't like horror movies. And I'm like, I know, but the lore is good. Leave me alone. We will see you guys soon. Sign up to the Patreon, share, like, subscribe, all those things. Follow us on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, follow us on Instagram if you're on Instagram. We're on Blue Sky. We're not super active on Blue Sky because sharing videos there is a bit of a faff.
We're trying.
We're trying. But we're definitely on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, so follow us on all of those if you haven't already, and throw this at everybody you know, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Vivian, for this amazing chat and letting me ramble. I appreciate it.
Anytime. You know, you just have to really pull my arm to talk about horror. You know me.
Oh yeah, it's such a hardship. We will see you soon, or you'll hear us soon, either way. Bye!
Bye!
Thank you for listening. Remember to like, review, and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast, and do give it a share. Tell your friends, family, fellow fans. Get the word out however you feel like you can. You can follow us on social media. Links are in the show notes, as well as some links to further reading for anyone who might be interested. Music for this episode was Nowhere Land by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. This episode was produced by Vivian Asimos and Holly Swinyard.
Okay.
All is fine with the world.
All is fine. We're good. We're okay.
We're fine. We're okay.
We're
doing
professional.
okay.
We know what we're doing.
What is happening?